Hi everyone, Mr. Willis here. Today I want to talk to you about how to create a foot for your pinch pot. Now at this point, hopefully you have a good understanding of what the techniques are that you need in order to create a quality pinch pot that is about pinky thickness, about that 1/4 of an inch thick, that has a smooth surface, that has a pretty even rim. And now we're able to go in and decide what do we want to do to add to this clay in order to give it stability. Because if you made your pinch pot correctly and you use proper technique, you should have a pinch pot that is round on the bottom. And so it's not going to be the most stable of bowls or cups that you've ever seen. So what you want to do is you want to add clay to the bottom of this piece in order to create stability on the bottom. Now, anytime you are adding clay to the bottom of your piece to create stability on the bottom, that in ceramics is called a foot. And so we're going to be adding a foot to the bottom of this piece. This is going to require more clay that we're going to be adding to the bottom of this piece, and it's also going to require the technique of slipping and scoring. Slipping and scoring is the technique that we use when we attach clay together. This is an extremely important technique, and if you do it correctly, your piece will be able to adhere to each other and you won't have any problems. But if you don't slip and score properly, it can cause some serious problems as your piece dries. And we want to avoid any cracks or any pieces falling off during the drying or firing process. So first, let me just set this aside for a moment. I want to talk to you about slipping and scoring. Slipping and scoring is the process where you're going to be taking two different pieces of clay and attaching them together. This is going to require two different types of things. You're going to need some water, and you're going to need some sort of tool that you can use for scratching the clay. And basically what we're going to be doing is mixing water into the surface of the clay to soften it and to make it so that you can put those together. So I'm just going to take two little chunks of clay here. I'm going to flatten them out on my canvas so that I can attach them together. Now, the mistake a lot of people make is they think that if they take two pieces of clay and just stick them together and push them together, that they're going to stay together. That is not the case. The reason these two pieces of clay are staying together right now is because there's a high moisture content in this clay, and that moisture is causing some stickiness to occur. Now, once this clay dries out and all of that moisture is gone, the stickiness is going to be gone as well. And these two pieces are just going to fall apart. They're not actually attached. And so what we need to do is make kind of a softer surface that will squish together and kind of create a layer of glue on the clay that will keep these attached. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one of the surfaces, I'm gonna add some water to it, and then I'm gonna take my pointy tool, my pin tool, or whatever I have to slip and score, and I'm gonna start to scratch the surface of this in all directions. And the scratching itself doesn't do anything. The water itself doesn't really do too much. It's both together. We have to scratch this clay and mix a little bit of water into that surface, and it's gonna create kind of like a goopy layer of slip on the surface of this clay. And so I want my clay to look just like that. Now, I want to do the same thing to the other piece as well. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to this. I'm going to slip and score this with my scoring tool. Scoring tools can be a lot of different things like we talked about before. It could be just a pointy stick like I'm using now, this kebab stick. You could actually use an actual pin tool. They work great. Other things that work really well are forks. They work great. You could use a toothpick, anything that's going to help to mix that water into the surface. And so now I have these two pieces of clay that have both been slipped and scored. So when I push these together, they're actually going to kind of squish together, and that layer of slip is going to adhere them so that they become one piece of clay instead of two pieces of clay that are just kind of stuck together by the moisture. And so I push these together, put a little pressure on to make sure it adheres all the way. And now this is much harder to pull apart. It doesn't want to come apart anymore because of that slipping and scoring. So before I was able to just pull these apart, and now I can't pull them apart very easily because of that slipping and scoring. So this is a very important step. Don't skimp on the slipping and scoring. In fact, I would recommend probably slip and score more than you need so that you ensure a good connection. If you don't do that, you might end up with some cracking. So you can always smooth out score marks that you can still see, but sometimes you can't always fix a crack that occurs because of poor slipping and scoring. All right, so I'm gonna take my pinch pot that I have. I've got a nice, smooth, evenly thick pinch pot. I'm gonna flip it upside down, and I'm going to attach a foot. Now a foot, like I said, is anything that creates stability on the bottom of your piece that you attach. It can look like anything. There are some typical shapes that people use for pinch pots for a foot, but you are not limited to those. This is an opportunity for you to be really creative with what you do. Your pinch pot foot can look like anything. Now, let me give you some examples of some things people do typically. One thing that's probably the most common thing that people do is they will take a piece of clay and they will kind of roll it out into a coil and roll it out to about pinky thickness or so. And then they'll use this coil to attach to the bottom of their piece kind of in a donut shape, like so, to create kind of like a donut foot. And this is probably the most common thing that people do, and it works really well. It creates a flat surface that creates good stability, and this is a really good option. Another thing that people do is sometimes they will just take 3 pieces of clay that are about the same size, and they will attach 3 little chunks of clay to the bottom to create kind of like a little tripod foot on the bottom like this. And this is fine too, as long as it's slipped and scored well. You could even extend these, make these longer, make them kind of more of a coil shape, and you could make legs, or you could make other coils and stack coils higher. You could make even like another little pinch pot. If I take some clay and I'll just make a speedy little pinch pot here, I could just make a second pinch pot and attach that pinch pot to the bottom of the piece to make kind of like a little pedestal foot on the bottom. That's not the best pinch pot of my life, but you can kind of see what it does. It creates kind of like a foot on the bottom. And this is a really good option. All of these things will work perfectly. You could even do something completely different. I've seen people add some sculptural components to this. I've seen people actually sculpt a literal foot that they attach to the bottom as their foot for their pinch pot. And so you can be as creative as you want, do whatever you'd like, as long as the thickness is about 1/4 inch, going for that pinky thickness even with the foot, and we want to make sure that it's slipped and scored well. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take some clay, I'm going to make a pinch pot foot. So I'm just going to make another smaller pinch pot, and I'll speed this portion up so that you don't have to watch too long as I make this other pinch pot. Another little pinch pot that I've made, and I've thinned it out to 1/4 inch. And so now I'm gonna go in and I need to slip and score both pieces as I am connecting these. And so first I'm going to go in, add some water to the bottom of my pinch pot, and I'm going to try and slip and score just like I did before. And I wanna slip and score a slightly larger area than I need so that I make sure that I don't under slip and score on accident. Like I said, I can always smooth out score marks that I see. Sometimes I'll add a little bit more water. Actually, most of the time it's a good idea to add a little bit more water through the process. You want to really soften that area up. So I want my surface area to look like that once it's done. And now I'll do the same thing to my other little pinch pot. I'm going to add water. I'm going to slip and score this in all directions. Really soften that up, create that nice layer of goopy slip that will squish together. And so now I can just take this, line it up so that it's nice and even. I'm gonna apply a little bit of pressure here to make sure that it adheres well. And then I can adjust it a little bit to make sure that it is in the right position. But that gives me a nice start to my pinch pot. It gives it kind of like an elevated foot that looks a little bit like a goblet or something like that. And this works great. Now, because I over slipped and scored a little bit, I still have some score marks down in there that I can go in and smooth out. So just take one of your wood tools that you have, or any tool that will fit in there, and you can just go in and smooth out those score marks. If you're worried about messing up your pinch pot from doing that, let your piece dry a little bit, and then once it's a little bit more leather hard, then you can go in and smooth out those score marks, and you can still get rid of them even in kind of the later, drier phases. So hopefully that helps in the slipping and scoring process and learning how to make a foot. Be creative with how you make that foot, have fun, and see what you can come up with for a piece that you can add to the bottom of your piece to create stability for your pinch pot. All right, this is Mr. Willis. We'll talk to you later.